Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third day already of the Immersive Tech Week. I'm very happy to see you all here and the panelists here. Welcome. This is, well, like I said, this is the third day. We're here until Friday. I hope you will have a wonderful session here. I'm sure you will have. Please also check out all the other things we have here with the playground, the church, the Impulse program, the pitches. But first, I leave you to Monique and this wonderful panel. Welcome.
All right, that was very concise. Very concise and precise. Because we started a little bit late, lots of people still downstairs, we're going to start immediately. So can I ask my panelists to join me here? Fantastic. And then I'm going to introduce all of them. Now, I told you before, if you were in this room right on time, to talk to your neighbors. I wasn't kidding. I'll ask you again later on, but with a different reason. All right. First of all, my name is Monique van Dusseldorp. I'm part of the program team. And when we were researching the program and what we wanted to do, we did something that was actually super interesting. I hadn't done this before in such a systematic manner. We say, okay, there's around 30 people in this industry that we think know everything and are super interesting. Let's just call all of them. So Benjamin and I sat down, emptied our agenda for a week, and just did 30-minute calls, video calls with everybody. If you ever want to research an industry, if you write to somebody, say, I think you're the expert in your field, can I have a 15-minute call with you? Sure, fine. Yeah. Ask nicely, of course. But it gave us a wonderful overview of the industry, and then we thought, okay, some of these people in that industry know so well what's interesting and good and where things are happening. Let's give them a special role. So Timmy here, Timmy Ghiurau, is one of those people, and we said, okay, why don't you select 3 people that you feel are at the forefront of thinking about this industry, about what is happening, and where we are going to take it from here. And I'm going to very briefly introduce all 4. I'm sort of here as a midwife to the discussion, because Timmy set it up. He sent me a lot of super interesting materials to read, so you know, if anybody wants to know, I've got background for you, ladies and gentlemen, because we're going to talk about art, design, engineering, how these things work together. Timmy, let's start with you, just that the audience understands who you are and what you do. You work at Volvo. What do you do there?
So, I'm an innovation leader at Volvo. First, I started with trying to democratize tools and methods, and especially around XR, real-time 3D. But now I work and I'm preoccupied more with future thinking, foresighting, and preparing Volvo for possible futures. And that's, of course, in using technologies to tell those stories or simulate and make it relevant to everyone. Now,
and then I will move on, but just very briefly, because it touches upon what we're going to talk about as well. So I think you specialized in eye tracking, right, when you started out at Volvo. But before that, you were actually out there as an artist. You were a musician.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting because it's relevant, where people collect their knowledge of how the world works. Moving forward, we'll touch upon the storylines later. Jussi, you were here yesterday as well. For some of you might have seen you already. You were the very first hire at Vario, which is a European, hero company, making these fantastic goggles. Tell us more. What does Vario do, and what do you do there?
Yeah, so I work as a chief brand officer. So how Vario looks, feels, and behaves, I think that's something that I've been building now for the past 6 years, from the very beginning of the company. But as a chief brand officer, I really work at the intersection of R&D, design, and marketing innovation, and kind of lead the team into doing things that they thought that wouldn't be possible, and kind of help them to together dream about the futures, just like Timmy said, about going into space or going into jet fighter pilots and these kind of things that maybe we thought in the beginning of the company that could be impossible to achieve. but it's really kind of gluing the creative and the engineering and the design into dreaming about the future together, because we know that the future in high technology and deep technology, the future needs to be communicated before it can be created. So it's about like design fiction of the future that comes together with the brilliant mind with engineer and design coming together.
And would you say, and then would you say that Varjo is at its core an engineering company, because they make hardware. Hardware is really hard. You need a lot of engineering to make hardware.
Right. So I would say it's a product company. We do hardware naturally. That's where it kind of embodies itself, the brand. But most of our people actually work in software and services, streaming services with the Varjo Reality Cloud and the software. So even though the brand kind of embodies, it manifests itself with something that you put in your head. Most of our people actually work in software and services.
Okay. And you yourself, do you see yourself as an engineer, an artist, a designer, storyteller?
My background is definitely on this kind of marketing and innovation, but I've been working my whole career with engineers and designers and coders, so we kind of speak the same language.
You're in the middle. You're the go-between. Carlos Calva. I mean, space is coming back as a theme, I think, because it's sort of the storytelling dream. But you worked at NASA for one thing. But can you tell us what you do right now?
Yeah, right now, for the past few years, I've been researching cognitive dissonance in XR. So what do we need to design and how to create experiences so they feel real at a subconscious level? And from that, I started to move more towards artificial intelligence within the same paradigm. So how do we design embodied artificial intelligence that can mimic how humans work, but that feel real not just from a interface perspective, but rather a connection more at a deep emotional level. And for that is looking into things like how the human memory works and how can we replicate that. How do we create a specific way of connecting these new systems with humans, and that the system, the AI, can actually learn as the human does and evolve as we do, because humans were non-static. So that's what I've been working on.
So you want to populate this, this AI-infused digital world that is building up with presences that feel more human, and it almost feels like, we'll come back, but tricking somebody into thinking something is human while it's not, or is it more to be better? I mean, just what is the connection? Well, we probably have to discuss this later on in the session a little bit more. But this is what you're working on, making things more human based on AI.
Absolutely.
We'll all be as distracted and moody as I am. We're not in a good world. Aura, you have an arts background because you have been thinking and working on art. Can you explain a little bit what you've been doing so far?
So far.
And in the future, no, so far.
Okay, yeah, well, my background is in analytic philosophy and contemporary art curating. So I would say that, as I like to see it, that I make art possible.
Yeah. So you have a philosophy background, and you have been working on doing a PhD, so doing that, but also curating art shows and spaces, including spaces online, right? You're working on metaverse art.
Most definitely. I would say that I've been physically curating all over the world, and then now recently in the metaverse space. And it's a very exciting space to be curating art.
And I really love this phrase, we'll come back to it, that you see art as a way to create agency for people to be creative or own things more, build things more.
I mean, and for me the question is about knowledge and the way we understand what knowledge is and how we share it. And in art we often claim that we produce knowledge, and I've been very critical towards that. And instead of saying that we can talk about knowledge, I want to think that we're actually creating meanings and something that happens between us, and we share that idea of something that is meaningful and has meaning and can gain more meaning.
Now, Timmy, can we have the first slide?
Yes.
That's the second one. The first one, the big one, the black one with the... So one back. Yes, exactly. This is a little bit what you wanted to explain, right? The Krebs cycle of creativity. Maybe you should explain. Tell us.
I mean, to your point, and I presented that last year, a bit of my journey. Like, through my journey, I always had this internal conflict. It's like, who am I? Like, am I a creative or am I a nerd? Can I be both? And that's why I was like playing with various fields like fashion, music, technology, research, then design. So I was like all over the place. And I felt that, okay, do I have focus? Can I actually do all these things together? Do they overlap? In what way do they overlap? And I'm a big fan of Neri Oxman from MIT Media Lab, and she created this space. And that's kind of how we, based on that model, we created the Innovation Arena department at Volvo, where we kind of brought a lot of misfits, like artists, technologists, researchers, and to be able to actually paint the future, we had to actually cover this field. And what I like about this framework that it takes on the right side is like the tech mindset, right? So through science, we are converting information to knowledge, and then through engineering, we convert knowledge to utility. And through design, we convert utility to behavior because we're catering for the users. And through art, and art being, various visual forms, audio, music, storytelling, new narratives, we move from behavior to culture. And as the world becomes more and more complex, or the problems that we try to tackle, like climate change and inequality and so on, that doesn't necessarily always come with, like the solutions are not coming necessarily from the tools or engineering. We need new narratives to be able to build a better future. And when I thought about this, and I'm like, okay, these are my great friends, and it's like with each I can talk about these fields like separately or all of them together, because I do believe this happens in seasons. Like Neri Oxman calls this like the Cinderella moment, the midnight, where all those things intersect, where Einstein meets Picasso. It's like, what do they talk about? So it's like, okay, let's see how that feels. Let's cover art, let's cover science, behavior, storytelling, engineering, and each of these wonderful people had impact on my career and in my transformation and so on. I am super thankful for instance, Jussi. I mean, he had huge impact on my career. Like with Vario having such a great product, it was so easy for me to do something great that hasn't been done before, like driving with a headset and so on. And with that storytelling, being inspired and having conversations with Carlos after, it's like, hey, I'm looking for ultimate immersion. I want to, be able to cater for all the human senses, like audio. I want just to be there, because I consider myself a dreamer, and my dream was to see how can I actually build and visualize those dreams as fast as possible. And then with Aura, we had this wonderful conversation of like the meaning of art, the meaning of design, the meaning of like what is the thinking and the thought process. How do I actually go deep to that and see why is art like it is? What's the next stage for it? And we were discussing that, we need the new renaissance, like, because we don't know, we got in a spot in humanity where technology and creativity and everything is so entangled together, because these things are not taken separate, they're all entangled.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have some reflection from the others as well, because this is sort of a speculative map, right? And as you mentioned, there might be a moment in time and space where all this works as you see it here, but it's also sort of a abstract map of what could happen. At the same time, this is where I actually want to have a look at the audience. I was trained as an artist, actually, and got lost in the world of the internet. But at the beginning of these internet days, there were a lot of people from art school doing internet stuff, because those were the only people that's like, oh, don't know anything. So what can you do with it? That attitude, we have no idea. Let's just try it out. Who in this audience feels they're at heart? Artist. Oh, one. No. Oh, quite a few, actually. Great. Who says, no, I'm more of the engineering kind? Oh, quite a few, yeah. Science, who's the scientist in the room? And design, that was the one. We have them all. we have them all here. Yes. Can I look at you, because you work in big companies, and this idea of multidisciplinarity, and you simply put people with different backgrounds together, it's not that easy. I mean, it's not how it works. Maybe start with Vajo and NASA, and you go ahead.
It's absolutely not easy, and and people tend, at least in my experience, try to stay in their own kind of boxes, and even like try to keep these boxes separated, right? The point is that you need this kind of glue, the people who can bring people together from different walks. And just like you said with your lab, like bringing these misfits together. And many times at Varjo, I feel that the work of branding is exactly to kind of be this glue between designers and R&D and engineers. And just a very kind of concrete example of what you, Timmy, said about the project that we did together with Varjo and Volvo. A year-long project where our R&D people went to visit Gothenburg, and we created a mixed reality technology where you could kind of drive with a car with the headset on, and people who said to me like, no, this is an R&D project, it's not a kind of marketing or branding project. And I said to them like, no, you don't really understand this. These things cannot be separated. There's a story that needs to be told, that is a story of how R&D works together, and we create this whole thing. So I think that my advice is like, don't listen to people who try to separate these things. They're like, this is about R&D or this is about science. Like, that's not the point. Like, the point is to create this fusion that you saw in the cycle. So it's already happening, and I think the most successful things that come out and make an impact in the world, this is where they all kind of come together. And maybe one example of that one seeing here is that we just recently last week brought XR3 in the zero gravity together with European Space Agency and our partner Pale Blue, and all this thing kind of started as a kind of design fiction already like 4 years ago. As we started Varjo, we started to imagine like, where do we want to take this technology? What's the kind of like place where our kind of creatives and our coders get their imagination kind of running? And we started this kind of like thing 5 years ago, and we had no idea like where this technology. We didn't know anyone from NASA or anyone from ESA or anywhere.
And to pick up, because you mentioned the word design fiction. Now, we know science fiction writers who come up with concepts of what the metaverse or anything else will look like in the future. But design fiction is now a real, well, an industry is the wrong word, but it's an area where quite a few people are working. It's sort of between art and design, and it's very much also a topic, design fiction, that comes up in conferences where you have to talk about ideas, oh, this could happen, this could happen. To me, how does that work in a company like Varjo? I mean,
to me, it really kind of resonated because, the work of marketing and branding many times is that it needs to pull the future towards present, like with a force, with the desirability. And this image, for example, when we launched our product like a couple of years ago, we created this idea so that we made it desirable enough for the engineers and people working on this science and this technology, make it like, that's the end goal, that's where we want to go. And to me, that kind of design fiction was that, yes, you create that future that becomes desirable enough, not only by us alone, but the whole kind of like ecosystem of European Space Agencies and partners like Pale Blue and so on. So, you create this, and then it becomes so desirable that people want to kind of like pull it towards present. And those people who are the most successful pulling this future towards present, those companies and people can really make a difference. And I think that's why
is
we're
it
here.
Because it's probably the wrong thing, but is it the artists that create the fiction and then the engineers and the designers that pull it back in, or is it more of a interplay between all these?
It's interplay all the time. It's a constant dialogue between companies and individuals and people coming together. So yeah, it is a constant dialogue, and I think this is one part of dialogue.
I'm looking at your names there, because so it would be wrong to say, you are an artist, come and be the artist. You have to. The artist should do other things than just be there and express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we've been lately, we've been talking a lot about who is an artist and who can call themselves an artist and how do you become an artist. And I think it is still a very prevailing question and a very interesting question. And to me, I would say that artist has the possibility to turn something maybe even private and individual, something emotional, an experience into universal language. So an artist has that possibility to, for example, like Jussi is describing here, to create and bring together different kinds of thinkings and then translate that so that we don't have to categorize our own doings and separate our processes from each other. And there is this possibility for unity and more like shared thinking. That's how I see it.
And they're also good at just experimenting so much with the tools that the tools will change, right? I mean, this is also what artists do. Carlos, you've worked a lot with NASA. You're now very deep into AI, and so let's make you the engineer here. But in this setting of, in the NASA setting, for instance, where, those are top engineers. Those are people that know how things work. So how does that work? How does that work when they have to get the shared dream? The shared dream, go to the moon, was a very, very good shared dream. But what now? How do you work with them?
So I think whenever my work in aerospace was primarily in XR. Yeah. And when you're trying to recreate something as complex as XR, you really need that full scope of engineering, scientists, artists, designers, because it gets really complex, and especially in aerospace where a problem is so deep that you need to really dig down in the engineering side. Without art, it can get hard to sometimes get perspective on certain things. And these are components where, for instance, what really makes a difference sometimes is a designer that has the support and the imagination from an artist to be able to accomplish what's needed. So if we look at examples like for deep space exploration, trying to go to Mars, which is a long journey. It's an 18-month journey back and forth. And one of the things that has always been a concern is the mental health of the crew members, because it's such a long flight. And then there is always this talk about what can we do, and for example, can we create a sense of an agent with AI that helps them stay sane? If you only approach it from science, you're going to go to, let's measure their biometrics and their EEG and try to see how they feel. But humans were way more complex than that. And if you go from engineering, you're trying to define, well, let's do really good exercising equipment so that they can stay healthy from that perspective. And I think when art comes in and starts to just create a storyboard of a crew member looking at the screen and getting this idea and sense that they're with their people at home or something like that, then you start dreaming of these other scenarios that may be way more complex, but that resonate a lot more with people. Because I do feel that at the end of the day, the people that get to maybe understand human emotion more than anyone else are artists, because they need to feel the raw emotion to be able to then portray art. When you get to the part of science, engineering, design, it's when you take that vision and then you look at the affordances from your own perspectives to say, how do we make this fit within reality today versus 6 months from now, 12 months, and how do we get closer to that dream?
And maybe it's interesting to define in this particular space. We are here at VR, this XR conference, Immersive Tech, this whole new field. Are the artists that you think of people that can write, for instance? Is it in the field of dialogue, or is it in the field of visuals, or is it in the field of theatrical performances? Or, artist is such a wide term. Which artists are we talking about? What are the artists that you feel at this junction where everything matters so much could really play a good role?
Yeah, now you're making a separation between the work of art, and we're talking about art here, which is also artistic thinking, creating the dialogue, creating these possibilities, expanding our possibilities to think and imagine. And there, an artist can produce a work of art, but then art is always a shared experience. It's something where we participate. I see that the work of art can be like an invitation to the dialogue, and then I participate in that work of art, and it becomes art that we start sharing together from the point of view and the point of origin of a work of art.
So we have to sort of leave this idea of the individual artist expressing their most individual view of the world, but more see it as an artistic sensibility, and then bring more people together. I know you have also been thinking about, what we're creating here as sort of the Gesamtkunstwerk, where all these people are working together to create something. Maybe you can expand a little bit on that.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I would love to see what we're talking about here. You were referring to our earlier conversation about Richard Wagner's idea of the Gesamtkunstwerk, which is the total work of art. And I like to see that exactly this bringing, and not only people who are working with art, but everyone basically sharing this engagement, having an access and taking forward this work of art that then becomes the totality, for example, on our path to Mars.
It's an interesting concept. Timmy, going back to you, I mean, maybe it's good to, so we have this feeling of these different cycles, ways they could work together, very often don't, but ideally, sometimes they do. But bring it back to this year, this moment in time, because my feeling is, and I'm the outside observer here, is everything is happening at once. Not just that the whole world is collapsing, that's another thing, but also happening. So there's generative AI that's suddenly coming out with vengeance, that even people in the field are completely surprised how fast it's going, and iteration after iteration, and things are changing. There's everything that's been learned over the last years in the world of virtual reality being applied also in virtual production, in all kinds of other realms. There's the software, there's the hardware, there are the platforms. It seems there's a lot happening right now. Maybe you could define this year, what is happening this year that makes this year feel so different?
I mean, this year showed us a lot also with the hype that was happening, for instance, with the metaverse, with the NFTs, and like how things are getting now some sort of foundation. And if we go back to design, I think we were talking a few times about, this one. It's like, as we are moving into a new era, right? Like we have, we call it Web3, but then what about Design 3? Because, we need to look at how to actually work with the new tools, with the methods, and why not being inspired by the OG school of design, like the Bauhaus, and with their principles. That was the curriculum where they studied materials, colors, textures, and so on. And now with Design 3, we need to look, at how do we work with senses? How do we work, for instance, with the XR? How are you building a tool, and how do you use the tool? Does the limitations of the tool direct you to create something in a specific way, and so on? So I think we are in a stage where we need a bit of an update to the curriculum to be able actually to capture what is happening. And to your point, for instance, this AI generative tools and so on, like we were discussing, if that is considered art, then should we actually allow AI to influence our culture, through influencing our behavior and our collective behavior to influence our culture? Should it be that entangled? Should we separate it? Should we have some
and
policies?
who gets to decide on that? Because it's out there. I mean,
and that's why, the point is, I always say, within this thing, it's like deciding what not to do, which is like the hardest thing, like the curatorship. And I've been talking a lot with Tara about this. Is like, you put all the art in the world in the biggest room, you have the biggest warehouse, not the biggest museum, because museum is deciding what you not put on the wall, like curatorship. And that's the same with the stories. What are the stories? And as we were discussing, to actually be able to tackle all these complex things, we need, collective imaginated futures. We need new narratives. And there is this model, the Bildung Rose, which is similar to the previous framework that I showed. And it was written by this Danish author that wrote the book Meta-Modernity and the Nordic Secret. It's kind of like this crisis in the design, and how Scandinavia was built, you know, on some principles and how it affected politics, the way we work, the way we express ourselves, and so on. And I think those new narratives that we need now, it's like we need to move from the power, from technology, from efficiency, from utility. And that's where I come from an industry, from automotive industry. I had to figure out, how do I do this in an ambidextrous way? Like with the left hand, I help the company to achieve their goals. And later today, I will talk about, okay, how did we actually build a car by using these XR technologies and simulations from a sketch and a dream on a board to actually have it on the road 2 weeks ago. And that's, you know, a complete journey. But then when I gained the trust from them that, hey, I use these tools to make, you know, our process more efficient, now let me dream and try to do this thing that has nothing to do with the car, with the automotive. What if I'm imagining some futures where the car doesn't even exist? What if we are the problem? What we are not the solution, right? Like how do we ask better questions? And that you do to actually, you know, redefining and getting to this art thinking, right? And I think
so this design 3, as you mentioned it, like you say that we have a Web 3 that we're building, a new iteration of the internet that we know, and it has very different functionalities built in. What is the main difference if you talk about design 3 as opposed to what we had before? And what is the main difference to what we had before when it comes to actually thinking about design for immersive tech? I mean, the field itself also defines some of the novelty, right? Maybe the others want to respond to that as well. I see Jussi wants to...
No, I just wanted to reflect what you said, Timmy, what you're working next, and you know, the thing that comes to my mind, like, you know, this new mindset, like, you know, what if we would together work with the technology that we have to make an invisible car? Like, you know, the car doesn't, you don't see the car anymore.
And we did that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So these kind of like new kind of ideas for the design tree that might be totally science fiction back in the day, but now we have these technologies and ideas like, you know, what if you cannot see the car anymore?
Yeah.
Like, you know, what about that one for the future of Volvo or for anyone? And these kind of ideas are, I think, pretty disruptive if you know, allow, and there's a framework with Volvo, for example, you know, think that far. I think that's going to be a revolutionary.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to also user experience and interactions, like to what Carlos mentioned before, like the affordances, and like how do you design for these new platforms, like social platforms or the metaverse identity that you're having there, or you're carrying it in other places, or like how are you acting with, like, I got into automotive because of another dream. It was an XR dream that I had 15 years ago, where I imagined that we will wear glasses and lenses. I was inspired by Johnny Quest and Matrix and, you know, Snow Crash. And
as we all are.
Yes. And there I was like, that for that to work, it means that we will all need to wear these sensors, like cameras, LiDARs, you know, to make sense of the environment. And we see that those technologies are in the phone today and in the headset, like Vario has the LiDAR and cameras on it and hand tracking, eye tracking. But then those are exactly the same sensors that we have in cars for self-driving cars or like safety purposes, exactly the same sensor stack, because you need to make sense of the environment, of the objects around you. You need to take care of the ones inside the car and the ones outside the car, right? So it's like, how do you do that? And then how do you take care of the planet? How do you make it as sustainable as possible? How do you reduce energy? And so it's like really complex.
And if you, I mean, for instance, this example with the sensors, the creation, the design of what is to come that you can imagine, and then you work hard at it, it gives me the feeling that both the creativity is, it's not like before, like these are the tools, these are the creative people, and then the engineering people make it happen, and then we have something, right? The creativity is in very deep knowledge of what is technologically possible. And it's not just the creativity, the moral choices are also much earlier in the process, because you decide very early on what's possible, not possible, how you interact, what dangers there are, and so forth. So this means that in that whole cycle, the roles are sort of turning all the time. Carlos, yes, the
There's-
AI is one of the big ones, of course, where we...
There is an interesting example. I overheard once from an industry person that worked a lot with military enterprise aerospace, which usually what they enjoy is really big budgets, but they lack from that creativity artist perspective. And they were talking about in the Pixar times, the early days of Pixar, the military wanted to create a sense of rendering crowds. So a lot of bodies in a specific order in animation, and with tons and tons of money, they just couldn't get there. And the reason is they were lacking creativity. When Pixar comes up with the movie Ants, and the director says, "Hey, we want 200 ants," and then the technical people says, "We can get you 100." And by the end of the movie, they got to a few thousand in rendering. And you need that vision of an artist driving these components. And for me, when Timmy and I talked about the sensors in a car, or Jussi and I were talking about this yesterday, how can we repurpose all of these sensors, put them in a house and use a Vario headset, and then you have this AI whose house belongs to the AI, and you go there and then you just hang out at the AI's house, right? Because if you don't think about those components, then yes, there is always affordances, there is always design choices, but design is meant to solve a purpose, and that drives engineering. But that doesn't mean that you cannot repurpose those assets, whether it's a digital asset, a creative asset, or specifically the sensors, and then say, what can we do with it? We talked about if a Volvo car had a personality, right? Because it can see. It could see things around it, like, can it record its own memories, right? Does it like rainy days more than it likes sunny days? And
Nice
why?
sunset,
Yeah.
observe the world and have an
that's
opinion.
just the artistic side of it. And why shouldn't the car have a personality? It would be actually quite cool if you get onto your car, and I told you yesterday, I want an AI that you text, and it goes like, I don't want to talk to you today. I'm just feeling kind of sad, man. Like, no, thank you. I'm not talking to you today. And probably people would actually like that more, because then it's the human need of, please like me, right?
It's like Kit, right? The car. It's
are
like our dreams are so much also coming out of the storytelling masters that imagined some of that already happening decades ago in some cases. Yeah. Maybe because I know you wanted to talk about this. It's not just having this image and this storytelling, but it's actually this world building. Just if we come to the metaverse, which of course is a big theme, and right now it's the story as it gets told of what could be that for a lot of us feels, What do you feel in world building is at this moment the interesting approach? I mean, how can we get there in a way that brings us to a more interesting future?
Yeah, I mean, to world building, we started some maybe 3 years ago. No, 2 years ago. I was really inspired by Black Mirror and Minority Report and so on. And I had the chance to meet and be friends with Alex McDowell, who was creative director of Minority Report. That's the movie that actually got me into XR. And I was so surprised to actually find out the whole process, how the movie worked. I'm trying to see if I can shift the slides. No, doesn't work. Yeah, now.
In the meantime, somebody needs to tell me what time we have now, because I don't have a clock. Yeah, sorry about that.
10:53. So we still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So as we were talking also about needing new narratives and stories, we were moving from tribal time when we were using metaphors to make sense of things, right? And then with the invention of the printing press, pretty much all the stories and art and design and forms became linear. It had a start and an end. Even if you go to a museum, that's how we experience it. But now with the tools we have at hand and the interaction methods and just being able to have so much data to back it up and simulate the data, we go into this circular approach, or where you can actually interact and have hundreds of possibilities. And that's why this works in foresighting. And this framework was done by Alex McDowell when he did Minority Report. Like Steven Spielberg came to him and say, hey, there's no script, but how does Tom Cruise go to work in 2040, right? And they started, okay, let's go and ask Lexus, what do they think about 2040? And they designed this self-driving pod. They went and asked Apple. It's like, hey, what should we think about interaction-wise? It's like, yeah, think about voice assistants. Then they went and asked Bulgari, like, how would you like to have your ads in the future? And they made these holographic ads, right? So you see Tom Cruise walking through that. In that movie, they filed over 120 patents that are associated with that movie because they were able to imagine the whole future, but in a holistic way. They had that major provocation. What if in 2040 we'll have this police, you know, kind of framework as they have it there? What if we can
and actual patents, not just movie patents, but actual, you know, and people building companies of the ideas they had because of having
and eye tracking and XR. But to do that, you need to look at the world in a holistic way, right? So that's what we were discussing with art. Like in the Renaissance, we were having the moment where we took and changed, you know, multiple areas. Now we're in the point where we need to understand the economy, the infrastructure, the culture, the value, the topologies, the domain, the psychology, because these things, if we allow technology to be so embedded in our life, we need to be able to answer those questions. And if we want to plan desirable futures, you know, like select, because that's the difference between forecasting and foresighting. Forecasting, they want to predict the future. Foresighting is like, let's put our creative minds together, and it's like, what is the desired future we want to live in? And it's like, how do we get there? And then, you know, go back and actually each identify their area where they can work on it, and so on. And that only happens through, you know, iterations, a lot of iterations, and that comes through art, through design. We went some time ago to Brâncuș, like this Romanian sculpture atelier in Paris. And since I was a kid, I learned that because I come from Romania, I learned that, okay, here's our Romanian hero, and he made this piece, right? And in that atelier, I saw like 100 of those pieces that didn't make it to MoMA, right? Yeah. And he's actually the person that sued the American government when he brought his piece. They wanted him to pay tax because it was not art, because it was abstract art. And he was like, who are you? Like, from the custom tolls or police to tell what is art or not. And that kind of created precedents, like where people could actually break some rules. You know, sculpture is not only Greek busts or something, so you can actually redefine it. And those iterations, or like moving from those dreams and visions to execution, how do we do that?
And if you say, so the foresighting idea, you know, there is this world-building idea that we should consider a more complete world when we are thinking of what we want to create. Yeah. Because it inspires, but it also you come up with completely new ideas. So, but if the foresighting idea is, okay, let's define the world we would want to be in, from each of you in your very specific own domain, what does that mean? What is that future that have you defined something that you're building? I think, Carlos, you most of all, I think, right? Because you've thought, okay, we need AI to become a human and then populate metaverse worlds with infused emotions. But what is the world you are thinking of when you're building something like this?
I mean, let's bring it a little bit into industry specific, so more metaverse. Yeah. And I want Aura to touch on this afterwards, because she mentioned something that inspires us, I think, a lot, and she mentioned it yesterday, which is how to, we have this moment where we can build art from a new perspective, and I'll let you talk about that. But for me, it's just the world I see is, we have 5 big social media companies, maybe 10. And then people expect that we're moving on to the next phase of the internet and we're going to have hundreds of thousands of worlds, and magically there is going to be enough humans to make it cool. And unless we start having a lot more babies really soon, it's not really going to happen. So there is this need, if you look into experiences today, where you just go and it feels empty. And there is this lack of humanity to them. There is this lack of soul. And that's a really crappy future to think about. Like, you want to go somewhere that it's cool, fun, enjoyable, that has a community, and that community, the question is, does it necessarily need to be a human community? Can it be partially an intelligent AI community? As far as it's fun enough, you can connect with it, and that's kind of the future, I imagine, is how does that touch the different points, not just in the metaverse, but an AR version of that? Can we make the imaginary friend that kids have be more digitally realistic 10 or 15 years from now? And that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I really do want, like, Aura to get out that art part, because I'll probably butcher it horribly, so I'll let you do it the right way so you don't get mad at me.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying earlier that there is no wrong way to talk about art, so you're fine. Yeah, no, but there's, I mean, so many interesting, just like all the ideas that I'm getting here now, but then, like, just to touch upon that, when we talk about AI and that type of an intelligence.
I must say, just before I keep talking, but it's interesting that you think of all these metaverses and there's not enough people, so let's have more people. That's interesting. I think most people would agree there's quite a few people around. They're just not interested in joining. But let's continue there.
Yeah, let's not make more people into this world. Yeah, no, but like when we talk about intelligence, I want us also to talk about the human intelligence. With AI, there is HI, actually vice versa, but that it can really be a meeting point, and we should come together, both of these intelligences, and see where that is leading. That's kind of what I'm eager to see. But then when it comes to art, and again, also world building and all these narratives, we are really living the time, obviously already past the time, when there were meta-narratives that were defining, that we were giving these narratives that we were following and looking into. And then also when it comes to art, we don't have that anymore. Like, of course, we have artists and curators defining and telling us what art is. But I'm really like interested in the future where art is about the experience, and that with your own experience, you actually yourself decide, was this art to me?
Okay. And because, I mean, Jussi, you have a sort of a positive vision in mind what you're building towards?
Yeah, I do have. I do have a lot of concerns about it as well, but I think that, like, now going to the next sprint to 2030, you know, there will be a programmable layer on top of this world. Some will call it metaverse, some will call it something else. And, you know, I have small kids, 4 and 6 year old, and the things that I'm constantly kind of like thinking is like, you know, who controls this next layer that is built on top of the real world? And I think we as a Europeans and Europe should kind of be leading this in what it would look like, what it should be. Should it be controlled by social advertising network? You know, I definitely don't think that should be the case.
And would your children be allowed to play with the imaginary friend Carlos is building for them?
I think it will be inevitable, and it will be inevitable, and
there might be an age limit to imaginary friends, right?
Absolutely. I think imaginary friends are great as long as those are not run by companies that, you know, monetize through gacha boxes that, you know, are kind of like, you know, lottery, kind of legal lottery for minors. You know, that's a horrible kind of future. But the point is that, you know, this future that we are creating, the 2030, this metaverse on top of the real world, I think it needs to be inclusive, so that, you know, as we spoke about, this kind of artist and creativity is able to shine through, and not only be run by, you know, cold business logic and all these kind of things. And that's why we working in these companies and working together, just like you said, Timmy said, like, you know, there needs to be room for companies and businesses to bring in artists and this kind of creativity and look at the world of the 2030 in multiple ways. And those kind of companies will ultimately, I think, will be the most successful doing this. So those are the kind of concerns, but also the hopes and dreams.
And I think, I mean, as a creative time, and this is a very creative time, it is natural for people that love tech and art and design and new things to look at those positive futures and to foresight the positive future. It's also a good thing that we have the Black Mirror in sensibilities to also imagine the darkest possible future based on what we have building now, right? Just to make sure that we don't actually build it. We almost have to round up. I want to give the last word to you, Timmy. What do you think should happen now?
Yeah, I mean, I think to be able to get to those futures, as I said, we need collective imaginated futures, and that comes back to our vocabulary. How do we define things, the curriculum? Because the tools themselves, if you use the same tools, you speak the same language, right? So not necessarily towards standardization, but like if we are looking to the same medium and we have a certain target audience, like let's say, for instance, we want to talk about privacy, like efficiency versus empathy towards the humans or each other and privacy. And then to be able to do that, we need the same reference points. We need the same vocabulary, so we are able to articulate and describe the future better in artistic form, in solutions, in tools, in policies, in innovations, and so on.
Okay. It's a call for language, and we're going to talk a lot with all of us, each other, over the next 3 days, so let's hope we find the good language to use so we understand better what we're building. Before I thank this panel for their fantastic contributions, Timmy is doing a keynote at the end of the day, 5, to talk about experiences at Volvo. Jussi is in the panel before that about European values in the internet. Carlos is doing a talk tomorrow on the avatar panel about what you can do with AI and avatars and populate in online worlds. And Aura will be back with us at the end of the day as well to share some reflections after having walked around all day and seeing all the sessions. So thank you so much, and see you back later on. All right. We're moving to the next sessions in a few minutes, so if you want to change rooms, do it now, and then we'll go to the next session.